Hi there, everyone. All right. I'm really happy you're here today. We've got a pretty big topic to discuss, something that I feel is really important and isn't talked about enough, especially in an educational setting. Um, so I'm going to say right now there's a trigger warning. We will be talking about death. We will be talking about student death. A school that I once worked with is facing the death of a student currently. And while I didn't know the student, I know quite a few teachers who are impacted. And it's really hard to deal with your own grief as well as the grief of your students. And you're going to deal with, that the compassion fatigue quite a bit. So I want to talk about what I've learned through my own experiences, um, the things that I've researched, the things that I have used in dealing with death. Um, so this isn't meant to be for every teacher, but it is meant for teachers who might be dealing with this or who want to make sure they're prepared in case this happens. Um, because I feel preparation is a really big piece of handling really big things like death. Um, so I have a few stories, unfortunately, to share, and I will try to do this as quickly as possible. But this is also a pretty big topic, and I talk a lot, so stick with me. It was my first school, my third year teaching, and I knew this young girl. She was in kindergarten my first year I was there, and she was defying all the odds. She was fighting back. She was a warrior. She made it through kindergarten. She made it through first grade, and she was coming into second grade. And um, I was the team lead, so I was in charge of, helping manage the grade level. Um, and this student went uh, into a different homeroom. I was the one who tested that class, and she was a part of my Wonder Woman group, my first group. This class of students were very tight knit. They were close. They grew up together. They did so much together. So this was just however they split the classes, there was closeness. Um, so with this particular child, it wasn't a question of if, it was when. There was, like I said, she was a warrior. So the school year started. She and her cousin grew up together, and he was in my class. Um, just some context there. So we get into the year, we hit winter break, and her wish was granted, and she was able to make a wish and go to Disney World, Disneyland, Disney World. And she took her cousin, and that was really great. And that was kind of my indicator that we should probably prepare. Um, so I reached out to my professors. I was getting my master's at this time. And so I reached out to them, letting them know that we might be dealing with the death of a student soon. And I was in my early to mid 20s. I did not feel like the most adult person in the room to deal with this. Um, I didn't, I was so hopeful that she was going to shock us all and get to third grade and hopefully fourth and fifth and get through elementary school. I was so hopeful for that. But yeah, it was that make a wish that kind of brought me back to reality and said, okay, you don't have a choice. You might not be the most adult in the room, but you are the one that's going to have to be ready. Um, so yeah, I reached out to my professors, and they helped me with some resources and just a direction to go in. And there were a few things I learned, the biggest of which was you have to use the word death and died. Um, Using language like moved on, passed on, that opens the door to misinterpretation. And with young children, like second graders, they're 7, 8 years old. Um, you want to be very clear. And it sounds harsh, but that honesty is what will process the best for them. So that was the biggest thing that I took from the research that I had done. And I had done quite a bit. Like, I printed articles, I highlighted it, and I handed it to my administrators and my team because I wanted us prepared, because I just knew. And on one morning in April, I had actually taken the day off to work on my master's. I was at the very end, and so it was my last few big projects that I had to work on. And I remember packing up my stuff. I was feeling pretty good because I was like, I'm going to knock these out, and then I can focus on, some end of the year things with my students. I got to a coffee shop, I set everything up, and I looked at my email. And this is like my one nod to administrators. That's not information to send an email that a student has died. A student that's in your grade level, that's been in your room, that has a connection to like, that's not information for an email. Call. And my partner, my teacher, who was her homeroom teacher, she didn't get a call either. And that's a problem. So administrators, don't do that. Call. Anyways, I remember like audibly gasping, and everybody in the shop was looking at me, and I gathered up my things and I drove back to my apartment, and I was sobbing. And I will never forget, on the drive home, the song that played was, I'm not going to sing it, but the If I Die Young, like that song. Oh my God. That was a really hard day. Really hard. I did not get work done. I think I went home and I cried on the floor in the living room for a couple of hours. And then my trauma response is preparation. So I cleaned myself up before the end of the school day. I went to the school and I went to talk to my principal about the plan, because there had to be a plan how to address this with the kids. Without going into too much detail, it was not received in the way I thought it would be. And I'm positive it had something to do with racism. And so after that conversation, I went back to my team and we came up with a plan for helping our students through this tough time. We had a field trip the next day, so we were going to save sharing until after the field trip. This was a field trip where there was a whole performance and show with all of the second graders in the district, and we didn't think it was appropriate to tell them something and then send them to a strange environment with a bunch of other kids where they'd be feeling a lot of feelings. So I let the principal and the school psych know, and they wanted to tell them themselves. So after that, they were going to come and tell each of the classes. So we had a plan. The cousin, her cousin who was in my class, was out of the room, and he did not return for a couple of weeks. And so I checked in on him, and periodically throughout that time he was out. Anyways, so the next morning I did have some girls, because like I said, it's a small community. I had some girls come in from another classroom, and they knew. And so they were very upset, understandably, and I gave them a hug, and I told them that we had a field trip, and that if they needed me during that time, they could come and talk to me, because we'd all be in the same space if they found themselves struggling. And I did ask that they didn't say too much right now, because we would be talking about it after the field trip. Because in my opinion, honesty is the best policy. I don't care how old those kids are. That's It's better to be honest. And they understood it and they said, okay. And they did come up to me during the show while we were on the field trip, and they just wanted a hug. So easy enough. We got back, and the principal and the school psych were going to classrooms. And like I said, I had done research and I had shared this. I had highlighted things, and I was very clear in what needed to happen. It was not handled well, to the point where I had to say it all again um, after they had left. Um, just some things like it's hard to move past because it was an injustice in a lot of ways, but also like a big sadness. Um, anyways, so they were told, but they needed to be told again. So we gathered on the carpet, and I said, she had died. She was with her family, and she's no longer hurting. She's no longer in pain because she had been dealing with medical issues her entire life. And I had in the circle, I had a few students that I knew were going to struggle. I had them right next to me. I remember seeing one of my boys just like this, and all you could see were his eyes, and they were like bugged out. All valid, all understandable. But I had another boy, and he was sitting almost directly across from me, and he looked at me and he goes, she's probably running now. She doesn't need a chair anymore. And like, ugh, it was what was needed to be said. And I think that kind of let students feel, because after that, the kids were crying and they were sharing memories, and uh, it was a heartbreak. It was absolute heartbreak. But in that moment, there was so much compassion and love and kindness. And so that's the next thing I wanted to say is let yourself feel with your students. Let yourself feel that sadness. I cried with them. One, because I was horribly sad. And two, some of them have never really faced grief. So I was one of the first people to show them what grief might look like. And to me, it looked like crying. And so I cried with them. I let them know it was okay if they wanted to cry, if they didn't want to cry. The rest of our day was coloring because you cannot focus on academics. You just don't. So, and that was planned ahead of time, that the rest of the classes would color and such. Um, but that was the rest of our day. Students could read if they wanted. They had a couple different options, and some of them engaged in play and some things, but there were a number of students who stayed close to me at my rainbow table, and they had questions, and I did my best to answer them without breaking any privacy. I didn't know too much anyway, so it wasn't like I had anything too secretive to say. We did talk about her cousin who was in our class and how we wanted to be supportive. I asked them if they would be comfortable writing letters, sharing memories of the student, or a joke to make him laugh, or just saying that we're here and that we care about him and we will support him. And we didn't do it that day. We did it the next day. It was one of the first things we did, and they loved it. They were processing their own struggles, and they were telling me jokes they were sharing. Like, it was really beautiful. And we got through it. So I ended up taking those letters to the wake with me and handing them to my student, who it was given to family for him to read later. But that student, he sat with me, with his first grade teacher, and with his cousin's teacher during the wake. And We also, because she was in my Wonder Woman group, I took the shirt that I used to wear for my Wonder Woman girls, and all of the second graders signed it, and we gifted it to her father. And he actually had it framed, and it's something that he holds close. And I, I thought it was nice because the kids wanted to do something to show that they cared, and to know that they're putting their name to something showed their care of her um, after. So we did get back to academics. We got back to learning. It didn't take too terribly long, but there were kids who would come up to me periodically through the rest of the year and say, hey, I'm upset, I'm sad, I don't feel great. And I just gave them some space. I gave them opportunities to journal. We talked. Yeah. So that was really hard. Um, and we got through it. We got through it. And it's something that stays with you. This is not something you just kind of move by. I always think of her. Her day is just, it's always something that comes around. And I note it, and I feel it still. Just like any kind of grief. A few years later, it's not a great way to segue. A few years later, I was teaching a student whose older brother had taken his own life over winter break. And normally, I will say, normally when students lose family members, it's an individual one-on-one conversation where, hey, if you're struggling, come to me, talk to me. But this student, he his coping is blurting, and I knew that well before this happened. His coping is blurting. He's a student with ADHD. We knew he would say something, and I know admin and the school psych, it was kind of agreed upon that it was okay. We got permission to share just that he had faced a death in the family, and if he says something and you're uncomfortable, to come to me. So we had that planned out. It was just a small thing, mainly because we knew kids might have questions, because it was going to be talked about, and it was. And I had a couple kids come up to me and ask about it, and we had the school psych who would pull kids who we thought like might need some extra support, as well as that student himself. But for the most part, when a death has happened with students, it's been just a one-on-one thing. That was just kind of it was an extreme circumstance that we just helped to prepare for. Sorry, my son came in with his veggie straws, which are his snack and food of the day. Um, okay, so moving forward, we hit the pandemic year, and my school had quite a bit of loss. In early 2020, our like volunteer grandpa, he just spent time with the kids. He knew all the kids. He cared so much about them. He was one of the first to get COVID, and he died in June. And so it was talked about the next year because kids asked where he was, and we talked honestly. My group of students actually, they were hit kind of hard. So I gave them space to draw cards that we could give to his family. Um, and they really liked that. I had one boy who was really proud of the joke he wrote on there because he didn't have a specific memory with this volunteer, and he was so proud of it. Um, they also dedicated our poetry book that we had published to him, and I think just little things like that remind you that these kids are deeply feeling humans, and it's okay to give them space to feel deeply. Um, that year later on, this is the 2020-2021 school year. It was the toughest year of my career, not just because of the pandemic, but it was just a very, very, very challenging group for me to deal with, while I was also dealing with my own struggles with the pandemic. Our counselor was amazing. Like, she was working with almost half my class, pulling them and helping them through, because they needed extra support, and I was just so thankful for her. She's absolutely amazing. I even, like, somewhere at like the end of winter, I wrote her a letter and I apologized. I was like, I feel like I just use you so much, and I had promised to take her out to dinner as soon as we could get back out in public and things. I just, like, I was struggling and I leaned on her so much, and she was so wonderful. And the day before we learned that she had died, uh, I had reached out to her. I knew she wasn't feeling good, and I messaged and just wanted to check in. I said, "How you doing? Do you need anything?" We talked back and forth really quickly. I said to take your time. Like, the students miss you, but we'll be ready when you are. And then the next day, we found out that she had died. And this was the end of April. And this hit my class hard. It actually kind of broke our class for the rest of the year a bit. It was really hard to recover from, to face. The kids dealt with their emotions in challenging ways, and we didn't have the support for that. One thing I will say, the district sent all of the counselors, because it was the day before. It was a Friday that we found out she had died, so it was a Monday when we were going to talk to kids. And all of the counselors came and helped teachers deliver the news. I had come in over the weekend and decorated her door. It was right next to mine, and kids were able to write on it. And I had little posters that I had made just to honor her. And another teacher, a third grade teacher, who died the next month because this was just a horrible year. She had made flowers out of paper. Sorry, I first recorded this video while he was napping, and then the sound didn't work on the whole video, so I'm now recording it while he's awake. But anyways, another teacher had made flowers that we put up. Oh, my slides. All right, I'm running out of time. But things that we did when we lost the teachers was we just talked. We wrote letters to the counselor after, kind of like our goodbye. Kids who didn't feel like they knew her well enough, kids who hadn't worked with her, they had other activities, so they didn't have to do these things. But we just, again, we made space. We took some time. We allowed ourselves to feel grief and to hopefully handle it in an appropriate way. And then here's just the last little bit I wanted to share. Students who do not, or children, people who do not process their grief, it shows up at odd times. And I mean, looking back, I guess it wasn't very odd. But I was back teaching second grade in 2022. And my grandma, who is 93, she had been in the hospital. I knew it was coming. I knew she was going to die. And so I let my students know that, hey, my grandma has not been well. She's lived a very long life, but I will be taking a couple days off after she dies. So, because I like to prepare my students for subs, in my head, it sounds like they will do better with a sub if I let them know ahead of time, but I am still working on that research. So it actually happened. My uncle had called me while we were in line to let me know that my grandma had died. And so the kids knew, and they were so sweet. They like trotted around me, giving me hugs, and I was so thankful. And they knew that I would be taking the next day or two off. I think it was close to a weekend anyway. But when I came back that next week, the kids were crazy. They were unhinged. And I couldn't figure it out. I was trying to do math and it just wasn't working. And so I just stopped and I gathered us all on the carpet and I was like, what's going on? Like, please talk to me. Talk to me. Did something happen while I was away? And then slowly, kids start crying. And they're facing grief from losing a pet, a family member, a friend, somebody that was important to them. And while I was being open and honest with them about the grief I was facing, because I was also like, thank you for giving me the space to grieve as I can feel sad about this. Thank you for letting me go home and face this. They were also grieving. It brought up their own grief. And so I had half the class in tears. We took some time to share a little bit about the people we were missing. We took a little bit of that time that morning to draw or color or write letters and journal. But like in the middle of this circle, while half of my class is crying, my principal walks in with some district people. They were thinking they were going to be watching math, and instead they're watching just my class in just a hot mess. But like, I don't regret it. I wouldn't have changed it. I'm glad that we took that time to address what they were going through, because we did get back to learning. It wasn't right then. And it took us a little bit of time, but we did get back to learning. If I had not addressed that, they would have been holding that in all day, and that would not have helped their learning. It would not have helped them focus or concentrate or do anything. So, in summary, like I said, I knew this was going to be long. Use death, use died over any other language. It is the most appropriate for them, even though it seems harsh. Feel your feelings with them, right? Because they're looking to you to know how to handle the grief as well. Because some of those grieving feelings can be really, really big and hard to manage. So help them with that. And it also helps you as you grieve, because crying is a physical release that can really have a lot of benefits. If you want to. If you don't want to cry, you don't have to cry. And then finally, let there be space. Academics can wait. You'll always get back to it. Allow space and time to grieve. And it doesn't always have to be right away. It shows up at different times. Sometimes it's whole group. Sometimes it's just one at a time, here and there, when it's needed. But make sure you give them space to feel they can grieve. It'll help academics and behavior a whole bunch when you do that. So yeah, it's a really, really kind of a dark topic, but I think it's a really important topic that we all need to have a resource in our back pocket. And I hope no one who watches this has to go through this experience, because it is gut wrenching. But it's something I feel should have a video, have some kind of access for teachers who go through it, because there isn't much out there. So yeah, if you have questions, if you are ending up going through something like this, please reach out to me. I will leave my email down below, and you can reach out. And I'm not like certified in anything special. I'm just a teacher who's been through this experience more than I'd like to ever experience, but I am here for you, and I will support you in any way that I can. Biggest thing, take care of yourself so you can take care of your students. But I hope you all have a great day, and I will be back soon.